Welcome to NACE 2017. If you can hear me right now, you need to get down to the I-CAR stage because we're gonna have some fun. Because I've got like 6 cups of coffee, a Red Bull, and a Monster Energy drink. It's on.
She's ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
She'll be twitching like me with Tourette's pretty soon.
I know. I want to make you feel at home, Mike.
Well, as part of I-CAR's Repairability Technical Support Initiative and our OEM and industry linking pin, Collision Hub and I-CAR are here today proudly to present our good friend Mike Anderson.
It's an honor to be here.
And, talk about some technical stuff and maybe answer a couple questions if anybody's got any questions.
Sounds
along
great.
the way.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Mike? What's been happening?
Well, first of all, Jason, you got to tell you, man, as I travel around the country, one of the things that I find is that a lot of people are not aware of all these cool things that are on I-CAR's website. And to be quite honest, I got to be transparent. You know, really, I had not used I-CAR's website since I owned my shops. And I would say in 2017 this year, I've been really getting engaged and just blown away with some of the resources you guys are offering. I think probably my best is your Ask I-CAR feature. I got to tell you, that's just an awesome feature. I don't know how many of you have used Ask I-CAR, but it's a great resource. And what I've seen is generally they have less than a 2-hour response time, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I can't cook dinner in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And they can answer my most pressing technical question in less than that.
Well, we've got a fantastic team back in Appleton that's available throughout the day to ask I-CAR questions. We post all those online once we answer them. So we've long had a call-in kind of line, but it was always Mike would call Jason, and Jason would give Mike the answer, and we kind of go along our way. But we recognize that a lot of people have very similar questions about
Absolutely
repair.
correct.
So we post all those online now. And the website itself's got over 50,000 pages of content now.
Yeah.
A lot of OEM-specific
Yeah, one of the
information, all those Ask I-CAR.
Yeah, what I like is that you're archiving the questions. So when people go to Ask I-CAR, and by the way, let's just show you where that's at very quickly. If you've never been to that before, you would actually go under Technical Knowledge. So you'd go under Technical Knowledge on I-CAR's website. And then when you go under Technical Knowledge, you will see where it says Ask I-CAR. So if you have a question, let me give you an example. Recently, I had a specific vehicle where there was a certain carrier that felt a door intrusion beam could be repaired on a specific vehicle. Well, I didn't want to argue with them, right? So what I did is I went to I-CAR's website, and I was actually in Canada when I did this, right? And I said, can you repair a door intrusion beam on this specific vehicle? Because the only way it's available is with a door shell. And I-CAR came back and said, no, you can't do this. So again, having access to something like that, I think helps to remove the friction between insurers and shops. Because at the end of the day, we're just looking for the truth, right?
Right, and a lot of times we start, I don't want to say arguments, we start dialogue without the information, and the information's right there.
You're absolutely correct.
20 years ago, I used to have to print, remember the I-CAR Advantage, the little newsletter? I would have to print them and file them and categorize them and put little sticky notes on them or whatever. And now all of that information, from daily articles to repairability to questions to OEM information, is at one site. And I tell everybody, I start every day on this website. Sometimes I'm on it 6, 7 times in the day, but the doors to the shop or the doors to my building don't open until I've seen what I-CAR's given me that day. Because usually, recently, a couple days ago, we got an answer to used quarter panels. That we've been arguing for a while.
I got to tell you what, man, I am so adamant about used quarter panels not being utilized in our industry. And it was so great to see I-CAR come out with something that was informative, right, and educational to create awareness to everybody about why you can't put quarter panels on some of the, or used quarter panels on vehicles. One of the things you need to understand is a lot of your quarter panels today are hem flanged, much like a door skin. So when you're saying put this used quarter panel on, not is it just a safe and improper repair, but it's just not cost effective.
Yeah, it's just kind of silly, but...
So, yeah, Jason, could you share a little bit with us about what that was about?
Yeah, so it's with regard to rolled hem flanges, which are becoming quite popular, so we no longer have those nice 90-degree bends with some spot weld access. So again, similar to, as you mentioned, a door skin, we're going to grind those edges off a lot of times. We're going to create a weakened joint in there. So what we did is we held a repairability summit. We brought in collision repair experts, we brought in insurers, we brought in vehicle manufacturers, and we talked about recycled quarter panels with rolled hem flanges. And the consensus of the group, and we sent it out for review and vetted it with the industry, was that recycled quarter panels with rolled hem flanges, so we ought to put that caveat in there, rolled hem flanges, is simply not a viable repair option for a number of different factors. And we actually just recently published that under we have our new I-CAR best practices page, which just went live this morning, just moments ago actually. So
is this like breaking news?
This is breaking
news.
Breaking news from NACE. I-CAR issues best practices. Hey, Mike, did your shops have best practices?
Absolutely we did. We had best practices at our shop. A lot of times people would develop what's called standard operating procedures or SOPs. And if you want to have SOPs, there's really 4 key things to that, right? And that is you need to really understand the way that you want things done, but more importantly, it's important to understand the learning styles that each of your people may have, right? And once you understand their learning style, then that's how we can best show them how to do things. But this is going to be a great resource for everybody involved.
It's essentially the location for all those best practices. So again, as we try to close gaps, which is one of the initiatives of the RTS program, is to try to close gaps where there are no procedures that exist. So again, bringing the industry together, developing best practices, vetting them with the industry, and truly having inter-industry. So this isn't an I-CAR document. This is an inter-industry developed and vetted best practice that we are publishing through the RTS website. Right. So we've got one on recycled quarter panels with rolled hem flanges. We've held a series of repairability summits on collision repair diagnostics. I know from time to time you may talk about the diagnostics and scanning once in a while.
And speaking of that, let me just interrupt you for a moment, Jason, is that one of the other things I love about I-CAR's website is I will tell you, I believe in order for a shop to thrive and not just survive, they must have OEM certifications. So that's my opinion. I think in order for a shop to thrive and not just survive, they must have OEM certifications. And so a lot of times when I'm interacting with shops, they're asking, well, Mike, how do I know what training I need for I-CAR certification? Well, for OEM certification. One of the other great resources that is actually on I-CAR's website is if you go to where it says educational programs and you drop down, you will actually see where it says OEM training requirements. This is a great resource for you. So if you do not currently have any OEM certifications and you're thinking about going and pursuing OEM certifications, which I think is critical to thriving and not just surviving, what you need to do is go to I-CAR's website and review these OEM training requirements, because there's some great resources here in regards to what you need to do to get up to speed. And it could also help you to do a little bit of a gap analysis to figure out maybe what you need in order to get to the next level to get I-CAR certified in order to become, like for example, Honda, you have to be I-CAR Gold Class, right?
Right. Hey, and that's a good segue there, Mike, to, it's great to be OEM certified, and it's great to be trained to keep that OEM certification, but let's face it, training is period required.
Absolutely
right. It's not an option, it's not a suggestion, it's not a get to it when we have some extra money. If you're going to open your doors today and call yourself a collision repair shop, well, you better be trained.
Absolutely
Because
agree.
when you think it's not going to hurt you, it's going to hurt you, and we saw that yesterday come out in an announcement about a lawsuit down in Dallas, Texas.
Very sad. Yeah, when I had my shops, one of the things that I mandated was that everybody that worked for me, we mandated they had to have a minimum of 90 hours continuing education a year. A minimum of 90 hours, right? And what happens is, that was either through I-CAR, OEM training, or in-house training. And recently in our Who Pays for What survey results that we published, we recently saw that people are spending less than 10 hours a year training on average per position. That's just incredible. I don't know, that's ridiculous is what it is.
Well, what happens when you do that, I think a lot of times when I talk to shops, they're like, well, we're doing what it takes to keep a certification, whether that's a DRP certification, whether it's an OEM certification, we're hitting that minimum. And then we think that's good. And then we realize that we got a monster lurking in the back of the shop, and when it rolls around in the front with an attorney standing next to it, it's a little too late to go training there.
You're absolutely right. And then you have those shops that say, well, I don't want to pay all this money to train my people, and then they leave. And then they leave, and et cetera, et cetera. But, instead of saying, what happens if I train them and I leave, what happens if you don't train them and they stay, right? And now they do an improper repair, and that leads to like what we're talking about with that Honda that was in the news yesterday, where unfortunately that couple got burned in the fire from that automobile accident. That was totally, that was avoidable. That could have been prevented.
Yeah, if you don't train your employees, you're going to pay one way or the other. You're going to pay if you train them, or you're going to pay if you don't train them. But either way, you're writing a check.
Well, not to mention, I-CAR did a study last year, I believe, and they actually showed that shops that had people that were I-CAR trained actually had better morale, better productivity, better profitability. So there are absolutely benefits to training, and there's a lot of training resources out there, and obviously, I-CAR is one of those.
And everybody benefits. It's improved cycle time, which means fewer rental days. So it's everybody wins. Customer gets their car back sooner. Insurance company's happy. They've got their customer back in their car. They're made whole again. So, the rate of change in today's vehicles is so fast compared to what it was, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. Every year when we go to Great Designs of Steel, there's a new 1,500, then 1,800. And actually we have 2,000 MPA steals of some sort probably. And it's important to know what we're working on, what we can and can't do on those vehicles. And we talked about the cruise on one of your shows not long ago.
Cruise, yep.
MIG bracing all over the place on that.
Yeah,
cruise.
I mean, to have a cruise, a car that's under $16,000, but the panel replacement procedures mimic that of an $80,000 to a $90,000 Mercedes. That changes the game for a lot of small shops, because for years there were shops that said, I don't need to invest in the equipment or the training. I'm not going to do the Audi, the Mercedes, the Porsche, European, or even the high-end Asian. I'm looking at just the Americans. Well, that's a $16,000 Mercedes sitting over there almost. By the time I buy the equipment and the skill level the technician's going to have, just put a quarter on that car.
Right, and one of the other things that, and Chris, we talked about this morning in an interview we did, is that kind of my new motto in life is learn to research, research to learn. We as an industry need to learn to research home repair procedures. And then we need to research those home repair procedures in order to learn how to properly and safely fix a vehicle. And I think that's absolutely critical. And if we don't expose our technicians to all these different resources out there, so let's talk about what's something we could use I-CAR's website for in order to research to learn, right? And that would be, I-CAR has this new feature about what vehicles require recalibrations, and I believe you just recently added something along with windshields as well, is that correct?
Yeah, we've got the repair information, repair guidelines for all the vehicle manufacturers for what they recommend for windshield installation, pinch weld flange preparation, if there are calibration requirements. So again, an area with just OEM glass replacement information for all the major vehicle manufacturers. Again, so we've taken a lot of time and research so that the industry doesn't have to. They can leverage the RTS portal to get to the information that they're looking for more quickly. We look at the OEM restraint system part calibration, the sectioning information that's available, and the OEM calibration requirement search, as you mentioned. We've got thousands of hours into this search tool so that estimators, auto physical damage appraisers don't have to spend a day trying to figure out, okay, it's got a camera in the glass, I'm replacing the glass, do I have to calibrate it? Rather than trying to find that information, we've got it in one location.
So one-stop shopping for this. Yeah. I got to give you an example. So my dad has a 2017 GM pickup truck. And it's never been in an accident, but he had a rock that actually damaged the windshield. He had to get a new windshield. And the glass company did not scan my dad's vehicle after it was done, and I scanned it utilizing the Aztec with a GM factory scan tool. And my dad's truck had never been in an accident, just got a windshield replaced, had 17 fault codes in it. 17 fault codes just from a windshield replacement. So when we think we're doing something as simple as a glass replacement where there's been no accident, we still need to make sure there's certain recalibrations that need to be done for these vehicles.
Well, the other thing that you want to think about there with calibrations is that we talked about that on the last show that we did, and you sent me a stand-in, and it was a fantastic point to make. So even just within Ford, so by using the technical support portal, same manufacturer, we could relatively say same ADAS systems, right? Lane blind spot, lane departure, all those things. The Explorer and the F-150, completely different post-repair calibration processes. So one of them bumper off, one of them bumper on. Well, that's going to change the entire way that car goes through my shop now, because the last thing I want to do, if I don't have the targets and the tools and I'm going to the dealer, is hang a freshly painted bumper and send it to the dealer to tear it apart, to calibrate the system to put it back together. So as a repairer now, I even have to use pre-scan, the website, my blueprinting process to think of at what part and time in this repair process does it go somewhere else before I reassemble the car. You're
absolutely right. And I got to tell you, I know recently Larry Montanez wrote an article, I believe for Hammer and Dolly, about post-measuring vehicles. I really believe the next thing we're going to see is that not just do we need to pre-measure a vehicle with a computerized measuring system, but post-measure it before it's delivered back to the consumer. If you look at one of the bulletins Honda put out, they said, look, we're making our metals and substrates out of some softer metals to transfer the inertia forces back through the vehicle. And so you may have a rear-end collision, and the inertia forces could transfer all the way up to the front of the vehicle. And I think when you're going back to that unfortunate accident that happened in Dallas, Texas, that I think that it's going to behoove the OEMs to say, look, we want this vehicle post-scan before it's released back to the consumer to make sure all the accident and collision and safety comfort features are working properly. But we also need to make sure that this vehicle was post-measured to ensure that structurally we've identified and repaired or corrected on any structural inaccuracies.
Yeah.
And that structure certainly ties into all those ADAS
systems.
Because again, if the structure's not correct, nothing's going to work that well.
And I think it was I want to say it was Nissan. I'm going to speak off the cuff here, and I'm probably going to get it wrong. You're going to correct me. That had an article thing they put out recently talking about how those blind sight monitors see. And if you're even 2 millimeters off, it changes how it sees.
Oh my gosh, I got a great example for you. So we had a Toyota that a shop repaired the right quarter panel. And on the right quarter panel where they repaired it at was exactly where the blind spot monitor was marked at, was mounted at. So the customer picked up their Toyota on February 4th of last year. Blind spot monitor was mounted where the shop had repaired the quarter panel, no warning lights in the dash. Customer's driving down the road, she put her turn signal on, blind spot monitor said it was okay to change lanes. She changed lanes and she hit another car. She took it back to the body shop, which happened to be a dealership body shop, and said, hey, I don't know what happened here. So they took and they scanned the vehicle, and they found out the vehicle had 3 fault codes, and one of those fault codes was that the blind spot monitor was off by 7 degrees. And upon researching it with Toyota, we found out it had a maximum tolerance of 5 degrees, and there was actually a recalibration process. Now keep in mind, there were no warning lights on this dash. So here's a deal where the shop fixed the quarter panel, but where it was repaired, it would not allow the blind spot monitor to actually be mounted properly. So that's a case where that quarter panel, after it was repaired, before it was even refinished or anything, they should have done a calibration to make sure it was right. And long story short, the shop ended up having to cut the quarter panel off and replace it on their dime. So I think when we start repairing these panels where these accident avoidance features like a blind spot monitor mounts at, it's really, really critical. And I'll give you another example. One of the other things I saw recently was I was researching something on a Audi Q7, and it said actually that if it had a lithium-ion high voltage battery, that the vehicle could not be baked more than 130 degrees Fahrenheit. So at the end of the day, I think we're going to start to see, when we have more electric vehicles, and I think electric vehicles will be the diesel of the future, that we're going to have to start looking at alternative drying methods, whether it's like the Global GFS Revo system or the Cymax system, but I think some of these vehicles are going to require special drying procedures. So I think there's a lot out there that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, the thing about it is, and I used to, if I'll go back and I'll put that insurer hat on back in those days, I used to brag that I could write 30 estimates in a day. And I was quick, man. But those days are gone.
You're absolutely right.
What even simply looks like a key scratch on a door now may take an hour's worth of research, and I start here. Like I always tell everybody, I start here, I cheat. Jason's my cheat, I go here. But I may spend an hour of researching just for a key scratch vandalism claim anymore, because what I miss really is life affecting for monitors and everything else. So it's crazy.
Yeah, you know, and a lot of times people ask me, they say, well, Mike, you know, where did all this come from? But it's all coming from, it's to save lives, right? You know, 3 years ago, the World Health Organization predicted that people dying as a result of a car accident would be the 5th leading cause of death by 2030. It was actually the 4th leading cause of death last year. So when you look at the OEM manufacturers, they're building vehicles with features. Bottom line is to save lives. And so when I start hearing people complain about severity and what it costs to do these things, my question to them is what is a life worth?
Right.
A life has to be worth that extra $200, whatever the case may be worth.
Right.
Yeah, things have changed just so dramatically. And you talk about the key scratch, and you mentioned the pre-scanning. The one thing that I try to stress to people, and I'm talking about the scanning part of it as well, is it's just a good business practice for you to do so you know what you're dealing with. You cannot write an accurate assessment of that vehicle unless you know everything is there. Obviously we got some damage on this cruise over here. You know, so we might suspect there's some structural damage on there, but unless we measure it, we don't know. And if we don't hook up a scan tool, we have no idea what we're dealing with. I think if we do that, we can start to identify, is this more likely related to the collision, or is this more likely to be a pre-existing condition? And then it makes that whole conversation a lot easier, versus if it's at the end, or when the customer comes back and says, it never did that before. Yeah. You have no evidence there to say to have a conversation.
Well,
so
most of the
it's
time,
important.
the customer's right. The car never did that before. We actually did screw
their car up. Yeah, we caused it, yes.
We used to blame them. I don't know why your radio stations aren't working, or I don't know why your Bluetooth microphone isn't working. Yeah, it was us all along for the last 16 years.
But I think one of the other things we got as an industry we miss out on, it's not just about plugging a scan tool in and scan the vehicle. There's a lot of diagnostics that goes on behind the scenes, and that's where we have to have technicians that are trained and qualified to do an output or a functionality test. Because it's not about just plugging it in, right? It's also about doing a functionality or output test, and I think this is really, really important for shops to understand. So Jason, let me ask you a question. Yeah. Do you foresee I-CAR coming out with classes in the future about how to take and actually perform those output or functionality tests or calibrations?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of introductory courses right now, one kind of a high-level overview of scan tools and kind of helping you through the thought process about what to look for in a scan tool and what's going to best fit your needs. And we also got one on front forward-facing camera alignment. So again, kind of showing some different examples of what's required for some different vehicle manufacturers. We got some Honda examples in there, some some Toyota, Lexus examples in there. But I certainly see a world where if we could, working with our vehicle manufacturer partners, developing some courses that are going to go really in depth into step by step how to do that.
How to do it.
Now, whether it's a course, whether it's a feature on the I-CAR RTS website, again, we're trying to get the information out there. We can't do it for the technician, but if we can educate them on some of the steps that are required, the difference between a static test and a dynamic test, and some of the requirements for that. I know a lot of our friends from the scan tool industry, the aftermarket scan tool industry, are starting to look at building targets. We're going to have some presentations later this week on some of the new features that are available from some of the ETI members that we work with quite closely. So we're getting a lot of support. People are getting a lot more knowledgeable about it. And I think similar to a lot of different things, a couple of years ago, we'll look back and this will be an all moot conversation because it'll just become part of our standard operating procedures, as you mentioned. Just like measuring, and just like MIG welding when it first came out, like spot welding and everything in between. But it's just kind of a progression of the industry.
But one of the things that I got to tell you that really troubles me is that in today's age, with Collision Hub, you have the I-CAR website, there's really no excuse for a shop not to be informed as how to do a safe and proper repair, because there's so many resources available to shops. I mean, whether it's an I-CAR class, Kristen, you publish awesome videos that you do. There's so many resources that if you're not safely, properly repairing a vehicle, shame on you.
Yeah, close your doors. And we used to, we would always say that we wanted to be supportive and friendly and nice, but quite honestly, if you can't research, if you can't buy the OEM procedures, if you can't follow them, if you can't scan, if you can't measure, close your doors. And I don't care who's paying you or not paying you. I know we get the excuse all the time, well, the insurer won't pay for that. That's not their job at all. Their job is they adjust claims and they follow a policy. Our job's fixing cars and putting customers back in them correctly, because the court isn't going to care what you got paid or didn't get paid to do. They're going to look at you and say you're the expert and it was up to you to do it right. And so right now as a shop, you just got to decide right is right and wrong is wrong. There's only one way to fix a car, and that's how we're going to do it.
Right, and I think also that when a customer comes in or a consumer and they sign an authorization form, they're basically saying, when they sign that, they're saying, I trust you to fix my car. And my question is, what are you doing with that trust, right? And whether an insurance company does or does not pay for something does not remove us from the liability, right? And I think that's something that's really, really important to us. And I think we need to understand that one of the things I-CAR has always said is, anything that I-CAR has, OEM repair procedures trumps that. And I think as an industry, we need to research these things more, and I think we need to do it at a more rapid pace. Now, obviously we have a lot of ways that we can research OEM repair procedures. We can go directly to the OEM's websites through www.oemOneStop.com. There are some third-party sources such as AllData, CCC's Repair Methods, Mitchell's Tech Advisor, Autotech's Tech Focus, where we can actually use third-party software to integrate with our estimating software to try to expedite this thing. And also, for those insurers out there that say shops need to upload an estimate in a certain time frame, I got to tell you, that is really counterproductive to us doing the proper research for safe and proper repair. I also want to encourage you to look up something else as well, and that is this. Most every OEM manufacturer either has a word or a symbol that they use to not notify you of non-reusable parts. Now that's not in the OEM parts graphics, but it's in the OEM parts repair procedures. So give you an example, Toyota uses a black dot. If you're in the Toyota OEM repair procedures and you see a black dot, it means it's a non-reusable part. If I'm in Nissan's OEM repair procedures, they have a black dot with a white X. If I'm in Mazda's, they have a black square with a white R. Now General Motors, BMW, they use the word replace or discard. So I think it's important that we understand that certain OEM manufacturers use different symbols or verbiage, and we need to be familiar with that as well, because it's also about understanding non-reusable parts.
Yeah, that's a big scary. I think we looked at some data about 6 months ago on vehicles that had non-reusable interior trim parts. And we know those are non-reusable because of the airbag deployment and the reason they're there. Well, I can't replace this part without taking this part off.
Yes.
But I bought this part 3,293 times. I bought this one 14.
There's an issue there.
There's an issue there, and we've got to address it. And if I was and I always throw it back when I put my insurer hat on, if I'm going to have a DRP program, man up. Because that customer is also trusting you because you gave them a referral to go to the shop. You said that you've checked them. You said that you've verified that they know what they're doing, and you need to know that. You need to know if that shop's not buying the non-replaceable parts. And if they're not, cut them off the program.
Totally agree.
Or when you find that they have a post-repair inspection that fails, cut them off the program. But that customer's trusting you, and we're not doing anything with that trust. We have all the data in the world at our fingertips, and we're checking rental and we're checking part usage in what different ways, but we're not checking them in the way that's impacting our customers.
And that's where I need to applaud FCA or Chrysler, right, or FCA. That is, they're going to be coming out with a scorecard here in the near future, and one of the things they're going to monitor on a shop is how often did you research the OEM repair procedures? How often did you scan a vehicle, and how many times did the customer have to bring a car back for a problem? And they're going to monitor that, right? So at the end of the day, if you're FCA certified and you're not researching over repair procedures, and FCA is going to be able to drill down and see how often you reviewed it, what did you review, how long did you view it, did you print it, and did you scan the vehicle, and if you have comebacks, right? And if so, then they're going to sit down and have a conversation with you. Yeah. So in my opinion, I think that's the right thing for them to do.
I think it's great.
What do you think about that?
No, I think it's great. What bothers me the most is that we had to have Dad come back and tell us that we're grounded. So, basically, we should have been doing this a long time ago. We've had data, we've had the abilities, we've supposedly had field people out re-inspecting cars and managing shops and doing things. We weren't taking our job seriously, and we kept turning out bad repair after bad repair, and it kept costing the OEMs brand recognition and repurchase, and the customers were having brand turnout. And so Dad had to step back in and say, okay, you guys can't figure out how to do this the right way, then we're going to help manage it, and we're going to put some parameters and things around it. And so while we're glad they're back, as an ex-insurer, I got to be a little ashamed of myself. I didn't do a good job, and I let a lot of people down, and they had to come back and tell me what to do.
Right, and so one of the other things I hope that our industry will find some solutions to is that some insurers say that if the line's on the estimate's included, delete it off the estimate. But that's a mistake, because if you're using one of these third-party software integrations like ALLDATA, CCC, repair methods, etc., it's looking at the verbiage or the text on the estimate, and that's actually what tells us whether that part's non-reusable or not. So if it's included and I deleted it, it's not going to alert me. Give you an example, I had a vehicle recently, a Nissan Versa, replacing the quarter panel. Well, Nissan says you can't weld within 12 inches of an electrical component, so I had to remove the airbag. But in order to remove the airbag, I had to remove the headliner. In order to get the headliner out, the center pillar trims. Well, when I researched the OEM repair procedures, it told me that the Nissan center pillar trim on the Nissan Versa was a non-reusable part. Well, if I had not had that, even though the Nissan Versa center pillar trim R&I was included, had I not had it on my estimate, it would not have alerted me to research that. I would not have known it was a non-reusable part, and I would have done a safe and improper repair.
Right. It's a new game, it's a new day. Having multiple lines, I think, honestly, it's not uncommon now for an estimate to go 200-300 lines on the estimate to get it right.